Hi class, my name is Benjamin Wynn, and today I'm going to be presenting the resource unit for Japanese American students. And to begin, their learning styles are kind of different. You know, to begin, we kind of found out that there's something called divergers, and these are very inquisitive and curious students who like to ask why things happen. And divergers also work well in groups, but they tend to avoid conflict. So as you will see within the lessons and the lesson plan, we do a lot of group activity, but I'm going to stick away from things such as debates and stuff like that that will cause conflicts. But with these group activities, everyone's input is important, and it'll have a healthy learning environment that all members, I think, will be able to get along well with. And so as we see here, under Gardner's multiple intelligences, that the Japanese American students follow three major intelligences. They cover the visual intelligence, the auditory intelligence, and the kinesthetic intelligence. Now, from this article that we read, they didn't have a profoundly high score in any of the intelligences, but these were actually their three highest. So they kind of ranged in the middle to the low sections, but these were their highest scoring areas. But what I thought was interesting that I read in the article was that many Japanese American students are able to adapt easily to different styles. So if they're used to and exposed to different styles more often, they will become comfortable and adapt to these styles and excel in them. As you see in the corner of this picture here, there's a sample of the different intelligences. The visual intelligence is if people learn visually through like posters, presentations, artwork, pictures, that kind of thing. They can see it and they can understand it. The next is the auditory, which is they learn by hearing either through the teacher or through their peers, which I think is very important, and we focus a lot on peer relations within the unit plan. And then finally, they have the kinesthetic intelligence, which they learn very well through moving around, role-playing, doing skits, videos, stuff like that. And as you'll see, they're moving around a lot in the classroom, and they get to know and interact with one another. So my classroom that I'm going to be presenting this to, that I'll be teaching, is an 11th grade U.S. history class, and the students should range from ages 16 to 17. And me personally, I'm a secondary education major here at Wayne State with a focus in social studies. So I just thought it was appropriate that I focus on what I am going to be teaching when I graduate. And I'm actually kind of familiar with some of the standards and some different learning style methods that I can use because I've taken a few other methods courses and higher up education classes so far. But the purpose of this whole unit is to actually learn to touch on the beginnings and the beginning events of World War II. And to do this, I'm using two major perspectives. The first perspective is a historical perspective. And then the second major one is the geographic perspective. And these two perspectives are two of the four major disciplines within social studies, and they build the basis for the whole framework for critical thinking, everything like that. They help build this basis of a very important framework that builds itself up. And I read on the standard sheet that these two really help form the basis for responsible citizens, along with economics and civics. So while we work on this through the lesson, my standards that I have are History 1.2, which is historical analysis and interpretation. And I think this standard is very important actually because we're going to be dealing with a lot of primary documents, and students are going to have to be able to read them, analyze them, interpret them, and tell their classmates, and on the evaluations why different things are important. You know, they need to understand what is going on and why things have certain significances. Our next standard that we're focusing on is History 1.4. This is historical understanding. This one is kind of obvious why it's in here. They need to understand what is happening in order to learn what is going on in the class. The next standard that we have is U.7, which is United States History 7. This covers the time period of the Great Depression and World War II. The Great Depression is not in this unit plan. It is in an earlier one, but right now we're focusing on the beginning of World War II. And then the next standard we're going with is Geography 1.3, which is Geographic Understanding. For this unit, it is important to understand the geography of Europe, Students are going to need to know the boundaries, where countries are, their capitals. These are all very important things, especially with the German expansion, where we're fighting in the wars. They need to know what is going on, and they need to know the area that they're studying. So the major objectives for my lessons are: in the first lesson, the learner will be able to identify the forces and events that led to the Second World War. The second objective for the second lesson, is the learner will be able to explain what happened in the Second World War before the United States entered. The third objective is the learner will discover and investigate the events of Pearl Harbor and D-Day. And the fourth objective for lesson 4 is the learner will be able to understand the impact of propaganda had on the United States during the war. So when I initiate this unit in lesson 1, I'm actually going to be taking the teacher suggestion approach. And this approach actually has to deal with teachers asking questions, posing questions. They can go answered, unanswered. The students need to be able to start thinking of what we're going to be doing. And actually the activity that I kind of made up and we're going to go with is a webbing brainstorming activity. So I'm going to be in the front of the room, and we're going to make a giant web. I'm going to have a main circle in the middle, and we're going to branch it out, and these students are going to give me responses of the endings of World War I. That's going to be the main central bubble, and then also another bubble is going to be causes of World War II. So they're going to give me both answers. And so as you see on the PowerPoint right here, there's an example of the webbing. Obviously, as you please disregard the content that's in those. I just kind of wanted to put it on there as a model of what we're going to be doing. And so then what I'm going to do now is my lesson plan is actually on lesson 1. So I'm just going to give a brief description of the multidisciplinary features of lesson 1. I'm going to come back to lesson 1 in the lesson plan. So I'm just going to run through these very quickly because I'm coming back to it eventually. And so the multidisciplinary features for lesson 1 consist of language experiences, which means that they are experience different language, storytelling, poetry, different things through readings, writings, everything like that. And then they also will have audiovisual experiences, which is kind of learning through technology, through films, clips, everything like that. Handcraft and art, they'll be doing a map where they're having to fill it in, so that kind of, and they're coloring it in, so that kind of is art. And then they'll be doing the growth, and they also have growth in social skills and attitudes, which they'll be working together, enhancing their social skills with one another. So we're going to start with our overview of lesson 2. And so lesson 2, the main objective was that students will be able to know what happened before the United States entered World War II. And to do this, we're going to use technology. We're actually going to be watching a video in class. It's titled World War II in Color. And it's about 48 minutes long, and I found it online and watched it. And it actually had some great examples, and it pretty much laid out the reasons why World War II happened. And it cuts off as soon as the United States enters. So it kind of fits in perfectly. It's kind of a good find. What I want the students to do is to take notes on it, very strict notes. And I'm going to pose 2 questions before we start the movie. So the first question is, I'm going to ask, what do you think this film is about based on the title? And so I want to get a few answers just to see what the students think that it's going to be about before we watch it. And the second one is, I want them to actually pay attention to the perspectives within the film, because a lot of the material covered is through different perspectives, and that's how they give you the information. And so for lesson 2, the multidisciplinary features for the lesson consist of language experiences and the audio-visual experiences. And then for lesson 2, the evaluation is going to be a reflective paper. It's actually kind of based off what we do with our videos in class every week. So I'm going to have the children do a summary on their notes. That's why we're taking notes. It's important to do that. So if they don't have any notes, obviously it's going to reflect in their summary. Next, we're going to do 3 things that interested them, and then elaborate on an argument they did not agree with, and then tell something that surprised you, and there's 15 points possible. I might be stealing this a little bit, sorry, because I think I learned very well from what we do in class. The summary makes me pay attention deeply into what we were doing, and then the interesting parts, it just makes me think a little deeper into what we're watching, what we're reading. And I like the argument, because sometimes you might not agree with everything you read or watch, and so it just gives the students a little bit of time to express their thoughts on what was going on in the video, in the film, and then just something that surprised you. There's probably going to be a lot of surprising things that they think are surprising when they're watching the film. So our overview for lesson 3 is, as earlier stated, the objective is we're going to investigate and discover the events of Pearl Harbor and D-Day. And we're going to do, in the beginning of class, we're going to start with a Prezi. And this Prezi is going to be based more on pictures instead of words and content in it. And so I have my spiel that I'll give and my information that I want the students to know. But it's going to be highly based on pictures, because a lot of visual learning, that's one of their intelligences. So they'll be able to see and learn through these pictures. And so what we'll do then, after we do this Prezi, is I'll pass out various primary documents to analyze, and what we're going to be focusing on is newspaper articles from the attack on Pearl Harbor from those days. And we'll also read and listen to President Roosevelt's address to the country when we declared war and when we decided to go into World War II. And so then after that, we will do one more video clip of a D-Day scene from the movie Saving Private Ryan. And from what I've read online and heard from other historians, is that this is one of the most accurately depicted film scenes that depicts D-Day. And I know it's a little graphic, I will say that, but I plan on, before the unit starts, or even at the beginning of the year, sending him a permission slip so we can watch kind of films like these. Because, if we watch something like that has a big impact, the children are going to remember that. Students remember these kind of things. Maybe it will have blood and gore in it, but they will get a better understanding of what happened by watching that film. And so the multidisciplinary features for this lesson will be language experiences, audio-visual experiences, and growth in social skills, because we'll be discussing the primary documents as a group. And the evaluation of this lesson will be students are to write a diary entry from a perspective of a soldier that was either in the attack on Pearl Harbor or the landing in Normandy during D-Day. And this is just a 5-point quick assignment. I just want to see that they understand what different perspectives are and that they can learn from this. So our 4th lesson that we have is what we're going to be doing is we're going to learn, the objective is learning, we're talking about the influence that propaganda had on the United States during World War II. So we're going to do, in the beginning of class, I'm going to have on the projector just one piece of propaganda. What we're going to do is we're going to analyze this as a group, and then after that we're going to have a group discussion on it. I will show them what to look for, just different rhetorical devices that might be in some of the pictures. And I'm going to also describe and kind of lecture on what the significance was of the time. And then what we're going to do, we're going to actually do a carousel activity. So I'm going to have 6 different posters or pictures set up around the room, and so they'll be distributed into 6 groups of 4. So they'll be able to work with their peers and discuss and analyze these different posters. They'll do it for about 5 minutes and then switch. So it'll take about 30 minutes in totality. And they'll analyze it as a group, so they'll be working on their social skills, and they will be working on analyzing these pieces of propaganda. After that, we'll come back into a class discussion, and then we'll talk about in a group of what we thought they were about, and we'll analyze them together. And then, so for this lesson, the multidisciplinary features are language experience, art, and handcrafts. That'll be for the evaluation. And then audio-visual experiences and growth in social skills. And for the evaluation of this lesson, students are directed to draw their own piece of propaganda. This is actually kind of a more creative evaluation. I know some might hate it, but we'll be building those different intelligences, and it will help them in different ways. And also with this, the propaganda, with drawing it, the students are to describe and give their own analysis of the work. And there are 15 points possible for this assignment. And now we get to the evaluation of the unit, and instead of doing an exam or a test, which is kind of what happens at the end of almost every unit in class, some kids aren't good test takers, and instead of doing an exam, we're changing it up, and we're going to do a tic-tac-toe project. And what this is if you kind of see on the model there on the bottom of the screen, it's laid out like a tic-tac-toe board, and students are to complete either 3 in a row, 3 in a column, or 3 diagonal, exactly the same rules to the game tic-tac-toe. And so each project, each task is worth 30 points with a total of 90. On the next slide, we will see what these different projects are. But as you see from this example on the screen, the different squares have different kinds of intelligences that are used. So obviously in one row you can have interpersonal, kinesthetic, and naturalist, or you can completely change it up and go naturalist, interpersonal, verbal. You know, it plays on some of the students' strengths, but also some of their weaknesses, so that they can build and adapt to these different kinds of intelligences. And the adapting, I want to be able to see that they can adapt, and these Japanese American students can adapt to what they're doing. So as we see on this next page is the actual evaluation that I wrote. And so on the first square, it's create a newspaper article about a major event that occurred in the beginning of World War II. Have to have a headline, 2 pictures, and a full page description. It's got to be in first person, actually like they were in the time. I think this is kind of creative. You know, it's a different way of writing a paper. The next one to the right, is make a skit. So this is more of a kinesthetic activity. You know, it's one of their strengths, so they should be able to have fun with this and be creative. So they just need to at least 3 students, 3 minutes, and this is just a reaction to a major historical event. As you see, the skit, the video, and the rap or writing a song, they all have automatic extra credit. A little bit more of an incentive for the students to want to do it. You know, sometimes kids get embarrassed by doing these things, but I think it's a little bit more fun and creative, and so they'll get automatic extra credit if they choose to do it. So it's kind of a bonus for them. Then next, after the skit, is MVP, which is kind of the most valuable player, which the students will have to write a biography about a major leader within the World War II era, and they must have a picture about and they have to talk about the early life, their career, and their contribution to the time. And they need to have at least 2 sources. The next part is to create a video. Up to 3 students, must be historically accurate, and all students must speak within the video, so I know they're all doing it. The next project they can do is create an annotative timeline. They have to have at least 10 events, and within these 10 events, you know, they just have to be historically accurate and important to our area of study. Next, we have write or perform a rap song, or make a song that's present it to the class, and you have to have 4 verses, a chorus of 4 lines, and you have to have a beat or a rhyme that goes with it. And then after this, we have to write a 2-page paper. It has to be a research paper on one of the events that we covered in class. It also has to have 2 sources to go with it. The next thing they can do is create a diary entry. I kind of like this one because it forces the students to use different perspectives for each entry, so they can get really creative with it, and it shows them that they want to learn from different areas. So they could do a British soldier, they could do a Holocaust survivor, maybe a girl that lives in Russia, or a student who's in America looking at propaganda. Who knows what they want to do? It gives the students a good chance to be creative and look through different perspectives. And the last one is to make a poster. You know, they have to have at least a few pictures on it, and then 1 to 2 sentences describing the poster, or each picture on the poster. And then another source of, those are all the different projects that they can do. And so, but what we'll do after the weekend, they'll have the whole weekend to work on this. I think that's an ample amount of time. But these students will then present their different projects. So we'll take that day to do presentations. So I think I can go and look and read what they have done, or I can evaluate their presentations, their skits, or their videos, or something like that. The next slide we have here is our materials that we need, and it's kind of a lengthy list of what we need, but it's broken up into the days, but it's kind of just basic materials. So next, we're going to dive into the lesson plan. The lesson plan is from the first lesson. That's what we skipped over earlier. So for the general information, since it's the high school class, I'm going to say we got about 55 minutes, and the number of students is 24. The objective for this lesson is the learner will be able to identify the endings of the First World War and the forces and events that led to the Second World War. They will also be able to recognize the geography of Europe from a map. So the lesson materials, as we see here, we need a whiteboard for the webbing activity, notebooks for notes, primaries documents I'd pass out, laptops for a different game that we're going to do, and atlases and their journals and blank maps for aids that we can use within the class. Alright, so for the introduction, as I said earlier, we're doing the teacher suggestion one where I get to pose questions and everything. And the webbing activity I talked about earlier, that is what we're doing for the first 10 minutes of class this day. So we're going to be webbing about World War I and World War II, and we'll be discussing the main points. So we get to our procedure. Excuse me because when I tried to change my procedure from my unit plan to the PowerPoint, I wasn't able to keep the numbers in consequential order, and the procedure is too long to put on one slide. So it would be going 1, 2, 3, and then I'd have the next slide, and it would go back to 1, 2, 3 or something like that. So I couldn't get it in sequence, and so I just decided to do bullet points. But there's about 8 or 9 different steps to my procedure, and I believe that if I had a substitute come into the class, it's easy enough for them to read, and they know exactly what we're doing that day, and they can do the lesson. So the first step, as we talked about twice already, is the webbing activity. So it's right after the bell rings, we're taking the first 10 minutes of class, doing the brainstorming and the webbing, and then we'll be talking about the main ideas and the most important ones that the students came up with. Notes in this section are very highly encouraged. It will help with their homework later on in the day, and it's important just to be able to review them. The second step that we have for our procedure is after the webbing, I'm breaking the classroom up into 3 groups of 8 students. After this, I'm passing out a different primary source to each group, and each student receives his or her own copy. And so the next step we're doing is students will have 15 minutes to read and synthesize the information from the source. And then students should also take notes on this, and they'll show why later in the procedure. They need to know what's going on, and it will help them remember what they're doing. And if we finish early, we can just move on to the next step. But 15 minutes because it's all planned out on this 55-minute schedule. So I give them 55 minutes to synthesize and read it. And as you see on the PowerPoint, the 3 primary sources we have are a condensed article from Adolf Hitler's one of his addresses about the invasion of Poland. It's kind of a lengthy one, so I'm going to condense it down into the main points. Next, we have a timeline of the beginning of World War II, which is exactly what we're covering in class that day. So that will be a very important one to look at. And then next, we'll have a condensed statement by the French about the German invasion. Once again, I'm condensing it because it's a very lengthy article, but it has some very key important points within it that I think are very helpful. And so next thing we're going to do, so the main activity for this lesson is called a jigsaw activity. So imagine that we have our 3 groups and we're in a triangle. So group 1 is here, group 2 is up here, and group 3 is here. So what we're doing is for the first 5 minutes, after they synthesize and read it, they have 5 minutes to discuss it within their own group at first. They need to say what's important and why do they think we're actually reading this article, give the perspective, just say what kind of importance does it have to the beginning of World War II. And then what will happen is I will select 4 people from each group. So those 4 students will rotate clockwise to the next group. And so the 4 students stay in their stations, and then the ones that are directed to move will move to the next station. And so what happens next is we'll have different students with different articles in the groups. So they have 1 minute to rotate, and then they have 5 minutes to discuss what their article is about. So they're teaching each other what is going on in these articles. That's where the jigsaw comes in. They're getting the missing pieces almost. And so they have 5 minutes to do this. I know that seems like a very short amount of time, but the longer I think the time that we have, the more off-task students will get. So they have 5 minutes, so about 2.5 minutes for each group to say why these articles are important, why the primary documents have relevance to what we are learning. And so they'll switch one more time with another minute for transition, and so they'll do it again. So each group will be reading and not reading, but they'll get the gist of all 3 articles. And so this will take 24 minutes in totality, And I think this is a good way for them to work with each other. It's building their interpersonal skills by working with other people, and since they are divergers, they're comfortable working with others, and there's not going to be any conflict because they're teaching each other what is going on in these primary documents. And so after this, the students will then go and grab a laptop from their ports, and then they will return to their seats. After this, the students will go into this link right here, and what I found was actually a pretty fun geography game that they can play. And so it has a tutorial and a game. So the tutorial, what it does is we're going to do the Europe section, obviously. And so in this tutorial, it guides them to where the countries are, so they get to learn firsthand by interacting with the technology of where these countries are. So after that, they can take the quiz, and they can just have some fun and see what they actually learned from that. And so we only have about 12 minutes left of class of this time, so the rest of the class period will be on this website doing this tutorial and playing the game. I think it's a good way to de-stress at the end of the day, and it's not super intensive, but they will still be learning while having fun. And then the students will have to put the laptops back before they leave class, and then that's the next part of the procedure. And then the last part of the procedure is that before the students leave, I'll be passing out the homework. I'll be passing out a map in the 3-2-1 journal, and then so the main evaluation for this lesson is that 3-2-1 journal. What they have to do is list 3 things that they learned, give 2 things that they thought were interesting, and at the end they have to ask 1 question. And then the map, what they have to do with the map is they have to label capitals, countries, and color it in so they can visually see the distinct borders and territories of the countries. But back to the journal, excuse me. These journals, I think, we'll be doing them often throughout the unit. Not this unit maybe, but other ones. It's a very easy way for myself to see what they're learning and what problems that they're having. It's almost a self-evaluation for me while I'm in my classroom. And so with what they are learning, I'm not going to be able to sit in on every single group during the jigsaw activity. I'll be around monitoring, maybe just they're on task, listening to what they're talking about. But I'll be able to see what they learned through their responses. And I think the question at the end is very important because I said it's a self-evaluation for me. I get to see what the students understand and what they don't understand. That's the most important part. If they don't understand something and I'm not directing it and saying it clearly, maybe it's my fault. Maybe they just don't understand it. So what we'll do in the beginning of the next class is we'll go over some of these questions as a warm-up, to bring the group back into focusing on their schoolwork. And I think that's a good way to segue into the next day. I'm sorry that I got kind of cut off there before the end, but I hope you guys enjoyed my lesson plan. I hope you can take something from it. I hope you learned that the Japanese American students, they don't specifically have very high intelligences in any one particular category, but they are very smart and they can adapt to different ones. To the groups that have gone already, awesome job. And then to the ones that still have to present, good luck in the future, and thank you.